Hello and welcome to today's webinar from Emergency Services Times. I'm Catherine Levin and I'm the editor of Emergency Services Times. Today, with our partner YPO, we're going to be looking at apprenticeships in the emergency services and what changes have taken place as a result of the new government coming in earlier this year. Our webinar is a chat, no presentations, no slides, it's just a conversation that should leave you interested and intrigued to find out more. We've got a Q&A function on our webinar software, so if you look on the right-hand side of your screen, you'll see the options there to put some questions into us. We will try and answer those as we go along, and you too can be part of our conversation. You'll also receive CPD accreditation for joining us today. You'll get a certificate from CPD Me at the end of the session, and if you're watching some catch-up, you'll get those probably later this month. The webinar is due to run for 50 minutes today, so let's get started. Just wait for our panel to join me on screen. Great, lovely to see you all. So I'm delighted today to introduce Rachel Mann, Jane Brown and Joe Morrissey. Welcome to you all. Rachel is Category Buyer HR Services for YPO. Jane is Apprenticeships and Succession Manager for Essex County Fire and Rescue Service. And Joe is the Workforce Strategy Lead for the National Police Chiefs Council's Forensic Capability Network. Welcome to you all. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. First of all, we are going to start with some strategy. So we always start this webinar by looking at where does this conversation, where's it grounded? We saw a Labour manifesto which talked about a youth guarantee of access to training, and said it was going to change the Apprenticeships Levy to be called the Skills and Growth Levy, and was going to create a new body called Skills. So lots of change in the sector, so we thought it was a good time to talk about that and what that means to the blue lights. A September announcement said the government would overhaul apprenticeships to support opportunity. So my first question this afternoon is to ask our panel what they think of all these changes. So I'm going to come to you first, Jane. Can we talk about the Apprenticeship Levy? So it's changed its name, but does it mean anything new?
Yes, I think it does. I think the government is very much looking at the skills agenda as a whole, trying to create opportunities for education and training and to make it less complicated by bringing in the Skills and Growth Levy and amalgamating services. What they're trying to do, I think, is to make sure that it's easy for people to access that training and learning. They are definitely looking at those initial skills in the workplace. They're looking at young people, and they're looking at how they can bring people through on a development journey, whether that is in many different sectors. They've definitely thought about the sectors that they see as important for the growth. It's very much linked to growth for the country as a whole, but they're looking regionally about where those gaps are and how they can be filled with the roles that are needed. They've done lots of data and research around what those roles are and the sectors and areas in which they are, the need is from. So, you've got things like health and social care, construction, and technical skills, IT, AI. So they see environmental. So there's lots of focus on different areas that they think will build the growth of the country, and they're linking that with skills. It's very clear and evident that employers' contribution to training has definitely dipped since COVID. So since that time, employers are not investing where they need to invest. And I think some people think that that's because it's quite complicated. And what they're trying to do is make it as simple as possible so that people can access the skills that we as employers find difficult to fill. So they're looking at the roles where there's been lots of skill gaps and people not being able to fill those roles. That's where they want to educate people, but they're also looking at the longer term plan of how they can upskill people and what those pathways look like in the future.
Okay, that sounds like a good way to move things forward. But you talk about complexity, and it's too complex. So what they do is they create a whole new body called Skills England. So Joe, is that going to reduce the complexity?
That's the idea. Obviously, we wait to see whether that actually happens in action. But Skills England is going to replace IFATE, the Institute for Apprenticeships and Technical Education that currently exists. And the government's vision for Skills England is that it will work on a national, regional and local approach, as Jane said. So it will provide the assessment of skills that are needed in all of those different areas, and it will address these, looking at what do they think of the future job predictions for the workforce, where have we got our skills gaps, and then they will feed back. So Skills England will be the body that feed back to the Department of Education on the skills and challenges that are needed and the progress that's being made on each area. It's going to be slightly different from IFATE in the respect that at the moment the functions of IFATE have been moved to the Secretary of State for the Department of Education, and the Department of Education will allocate the roles to Skills England. But at the moment we don't know whether Skills England will be a statutory body as IFATE was, whether it's going to be in statute or not. And I think for us,
so it's more than a change of name then, Joe.
Yeah, definitely. The structure and the way it works has definitely changed. What I think as employers we're really keen that they maintain from the IFATE model is the relationship that's built with employers and with the trailblazer groups that were set up to create apprenticeships. We're really hoping that those relationships that have been built across organisations and across skills won't be lost, and that we keep some of those positives of the relationship that we had with IFATE. But what we potentially could see and hope to see, and what the government are saying will happen, is that it will make the route easier and more straightforward, that there will be less bureaucracy involved, there'll be less steps involved, and it will be easier for us to identify the skills gaps, the challenges, the changes needed, and address them, whether that's a local issue, a national issue, a regional issue, or cross-sector.
Okay, all right. So the announcement of Skills England, this phrase I've got here about they were going to overhaul apprenticeships to support opportunity. So Rachel, in terms of that opportunity, where does it sit with the other changes that we're seeing around Procurement Act, for example, which is due to come in February? Is that more complexity? Is that going to help what we're sort of hearing about these changes to the levy and this new body? Where does that fit in as well?
So YPO currently supports public sector procurement with our National Apprenticeships Framework. It's currently in line with IFATE, so obviously we'll be migrating over to Skills England when that comes in. Now, in terms of the Procurement Act, that's moved to February 2025, and one of the government's initiatives is to support skills and driving economic growth. And one of the priorities of the new Procurement Act is social value, incorporating procurement processes and opportunities. So this will encourage and be really nice to see a lot of SMEs encouraged as well more. So we have a lot already that we work with a good opportunity for the shorter routes for bespoke training, so they can bring more strength there in what they specialise in. So really, we will need to adapt. There'll be, changes along the way, but in terms of IFATE, obviously there will be that will hopefully strengthen the relationships that's already there with certain employers in terms of the trailblazer groups, developing apprenticeships, certainly. Ours is a national framework, so we can support all the different routes and any customer journey along the way.
Okay, so growth is a big word for this government. We hear it a lot from the Chancellor. She talks to us about growth. So in order to have some of this growth, they're focusing very much on young people and whether they actually need to give them the skills to enter the workplace and contribute to that growth. One of those things is around this idea of a new foundation apprenticeship, which I've picked up on. Can we talk a little bit about what that means? Jane, a foundation apprenticeship, if I was in the fire rescue service, would I be interested in that?
Yes, I think we would. I think there is scope for any organisation to bring. I mean, I think one of the things very clear in the report, we are an ageing population. There's a finite amount of young people, and it's not that we're going to run out, but I think we need to put our case forward to recruit those young people. We need to do that well. So in order to do that, we need to start them somewhere. And if that means the work in the community that we're doing, that engagement piece is so important, so that we can get them excited about potentially coming to work for a fire and rescue service. And it's really important to engage them young. We have fire cadets and other things that that do some of that for us as well. But yes, we need to be thinking about how we can get foundation, if not certainly level 2, into our organisation, and we can develop a sustainable pathway so somebody can see where they can come in. They might not come in as a firefighter, they might come in as business admin and then end up being a firefighter or not, and then and doing other roles. But I think we need to really create and think about that sustainable pathway which allows people to see that they've got somewhere to go, and by educating them and training and upping their skills as they're going along, they're much more likely to stay as well. You know, it's no good saying we've got X amount of levy and we've got to put this amount of apprentices through it. It's about those sustainable pathways. So, you know, they're joining the service and they're just continuing to develop in different roles and in different ways where that's possible. Obviously, we probably couldn't give everybody a job, but we've got to make sure that there's a pathway and we're not bringing anyone in just to tick that box, if you like. We've got to make sure it's sustainable, and that's a lot of what we're talking about here. And I think there was a lot in the report about retraining as well. You know, there's going to be roles that are going to be gone in the next 10 years, and what they're saying is we need to retrain, especially some of our young people, around what those new opportunities are going to be. And so I think there's a lot of talk about that as well, making sure that we get people into roles that are going to be sustainable, not going to be gone by AI and automation and all the other things that I'm talking
Although
about.
I suspect that most young people don't stay in a career for life now. They will not get to come and do 30 years at your service. They'll dot them out, but at least they get some portability, structured skills, recognition of skills in this way. So Jo, if there's a 1-year foundation apprenticeship and it's at level 2, how does that work with something more specialist thinking about forensics? Is it actually of any use to you in your bit of the justice world?
I think I agree with everything Jane has said for wider policing. Definitely, I can see all of the same benefits that she's talked about for the wider policing family, that would work. For us, we have focused a lot on changing the people that creating new routes into our profession. We've historically recruited graduates over the last 10 years or so. And we're looking at how can we recruit different people, other people. So created a level 4 apprenticeship so that we are encouraging younger people and also more diversity in our workforce. So it's not the same people that we're recruiting all the time. We're looking at recruiting more. So I wouldn't say that we definitely wouldn't consider foundation apprenticeships, but with the level 4, we're trying to allow more accessibility into forensic careers so that we're not just restricting it to people that have come in from a specific route, and also those career changes that you talked about, that it's not only just young people, it's people that are looking at changing careers, but I think foundation apprenticeships are something we could potentially consider in the future for different areas of forensics.
Okay, so that's interesting itself, isn't it? It's kind of making you think differently about the possibilities of bringing people into profession in different ways. So Rachel, in terms of frameworks and that people actually accessing the providers, do you think there'll be an influx of providers who are offering foundation apprenticeships?
Yes. Again, it's offering that greater flexibility for a shorter term apprenticeship. So with us having a framework for a national basis, then certainly one thing as well that we also support with, we work with the education sector, so it's exploring that pathway for school leavers after school leaving age and looking at all the different routes. So whilst we work so closely with the public sector in terms of NHS, fire, police, it's looking at that career path and thinking, right, okay, actually there's a real opportunity there. We've had wonderful case studies from different learners and how they've started their journey from such a young age. I think it's really important that we support that initiative, certainly at framework level, but certainly for communities and for our services as well.
Okay. One of the questions we've got here is asking us whether foundation apprenticeships will have a levy attached. Do any of you know the answer to that?
I would have thought it would have, yes. I mean, you can have levy attachment for a functional skill. So I would say you can have levy attachment for a qualification. Would you not, Rachel?
Yes, I would have thought it would have as well.
Yeah.
But just with it being coming in at that level, the majority obviously do now. I can't see there being a big fundamental change there.
The problem that
would you expect Skills England to confirm that as part of a sort of communications process for these changes?
Yeah, I think the only problem you will have there is it depending on the cost of the levy. It is about that cost, isn't it, Rachel? Sometimes providers, it needs to be at a certain level for providers to want to take up that option. Okay. So it will depend on what is prices associated with that.
All right. And then this other question we've got, which is around young people, before we move on to talking about skills gaps, is around asking if there are any internship possibilities within emergency services to take on the skills of students. Now, I'm not sure the basis of that question. I wonder if that's around almost like tasters, like they get a sense of what it's like as an internship and then potentially it could become an apprentice. I wonder if that's what they mean by that. But thoughts on that? Do you have internships for forensics?
Yeah, there are some internships. There are placement opportunities. That's what exists from
universities.
Usually for university students, So at the end of their second year, they can do a year's industrial placement with the police force. Some forces do shadowing schemes. Some open up internships. So yes, they do exist within forensics and within the wider police and community.
And do you find that those people who do internships with forensics come back and start their career doing forensics once they've graduated?
Of the industrial placements, I think, I don't know the exact number, but I would say probably above 75% of them end up working full-time employment in forensic disciplines.
Yeah. You must be doing a good job with your internships then. That's excellent. Yeah, very good. How about you, Jane, in fire? Internships in fire?
But not so much, no. There's the odd opportunity, and it's normally for 3 months, and it's generally more in what we call green book roles, so non-operational roles, and L&D roles and things like that. So where you're supporting the development of others, but not really in the same way that policing do.
Okay, all right. Let's move us on to talk about skills gaps then. So the government has emphasised this as a key role for Skills England, that they should be thinking about filling those skills gaps in order to deliver the growth that it talks about. But what does it look like in the blue light? So digital skills, environmental skills. Rachel, what kind of skills could we be filling those gaps? What are the gaps that we're seeing? Are they digital, or is there other spaces?
So certainly with the big emphasis we've seen, certainly since police forces in the main have procured through the framework for the past 6 years. I think there will be more of a, following the critical demand in the occupation report, for a lower level for the police community support officers. I think the vital thing is for any career path, it's keeping offering those skills for life. With a focus on young people, there's still the difficulty in opportunities for progression, retraining in the future, but I think it's making sure that we have got that progression path that's still in place.
Okay, and then Jo, so forensics, quite technical, complex thing, I imagine. I don't know much about it, I'll confess, but in terms of the skills gaps that you see, could apprenticeships help with that?
Yeah, definitely. So there's definitely a skills gap in forensics in specific disciplines, particularly digital forensics. It's such a fast changing, increasing demand crime area that for policing to keep up with it, we need to make sure that we are recruiting, retaining, training our personnel continuously. And the digital capabilities across the entire workforce need to keep pace with the changes that are happening. And that's difficult to do because every week there's a different way of committing digital crime. So it's hard for us to keep up with. But we have introduced an apprenticeship to address this, so that we're not only bringing in younger people and more diverse people, we're bringing in people who might not have considered working for policing or working in digital forensics, who are seeing that it can be a career for them as well. So apprenticeships is definitely a positive route for us to bring in new people to address a massive skills gap.
Yeah, it's interesting you talk about the changing nature of it. I was at the National Police Chiefs Council conference this week, and somebody there said that by the time I finished speaking, someone will have created a new way of defrauding somebody online about something. It's just this continual change and keeping up with that.
And that's why the Home Secretary, in her presentation to that conference, talked very much about forensics, and particularly digital forensics, being one of the highest priority areas for this government, and that they want to bring it, nationalise it more, and to introduce and improve the skills in those areas.
Right. This new national body she talked about.
Yes.
National body. Interesting. Yeah. Okay, good connections there with the other things going on. So Jane, we talked in our pre-brief about environmental skills and sort of particularly with the putting more and more emphasis on the environment with biodiversity net gain, which we'll be talking about next week in our webinar, about social value, about electric vehicles, about greening our environment and meeting climate change goals. So what does it look like in terms of skills gaps from a fire point of view?
I think some of those skills gaps are around, the fire engineering after Grenfell and making sure, that we are able to respond in the way the government needs us to, and upskilling somebody into those roles takes a long time. It's not something that you do overnight. It takes years of training and development. And, you're working against a background where outside, if you're not within the public sector, you can earn a lot of money. And so you're balancing the wanting to give all that training and education to people to upskill them into the roles that you desperately need, but it's making sure that we can retain them and keep them in those roles. So that's a balancing act, and it's very much around the fire, the protection and the fire engineering as a whole. And then I think as a fire service in general, I think the government's very much looking at environmental and digital and technical skills as a whole country, and obviously we've got to respond to that as a fire service. So if we're going to have hydrogen cars, or we've got a lot more electrical cars, and we've got a lot more flooding, and we've got a lot more wildfires, all those things impact on us as a service, and it's about how do we ensure that we're training our people to deal with those different things. Exactly as Joe said around, it's almost like some of these criminals are one step ahead, and you're trying to catch up, and it's about the other things that impact on the environment, and sometimes you don't know about them until you're in it. So I think there's a lot for us to learn from other people as well, but there's a lot in this paper that talks about the technological side of things and how we can upskill our people.
Excellent. So back to that Skills England report, which is good. So let's move on to talk about so people have done their apprenticeship, you've invested in them, they've got their endpoint assessment, they've finished it all. But for me, it's the question is, well, then what? So we talk about lifelong learners. So you give them an APA and go, thanks very much. Off you go and do your job for the next 20 years. So Jane, I asked you to talk about this at the Emergency Services Show back in September. You had a panel and people coming and listening to you talking about your thoughts about what happens when the apprenticeship is over. So do you want to just give us a quick summary of the kind of things you said and the response of the audience to that? Are other people concerned about that too?
Yeah.
What are you doing?
I think from our personal experience, I think it's been a positive thing. I think when we have all ages of people come as apprenticeship firefighters, they're a range of age and experience. But I think what it does do, and what we've seen, is it creates within them a love of learning. They often say to me, right, Jane, I've done that, what's next? I'm on my learning groove now, and how can I keep going? And I think it generates a real positive attitude to learning, and I think that's what we need in order to keep people in our services and making sure that they continue to develop. And I think that we're in a good place with that. We've very much aligned our leadership and succession programs to the apprenticeship in the fact that they now do a portfolio. So they're gathering that evidence, and they've obviously been used to doing that as an apprentice. So it almost feels like they're just carrying on that journey, and they're gaining evidence at the next role so that they can then come through an assessment process for them to gain the role at the end. And it feels like it almost encourages people to keep in that development. And also, it's the fact that, they're new, they're going onto station, they're working with people that have often been in the service a long time, but they're bringing new learning, they're bringing that new attitude and behaviour, they're bringing insights that people that are on the watch that have been there for a substantive time don't always know. And the bond together has been really good to see in lots of places where, they're learning from each other. And just because they're new as an apprentice doesn't mean that other people can't learn from them that have been in a job 20 years. So it's that nice mix of developing that space where everyone learns from each other, and also, we're attracting different people, that diversity that you talked about, Joe. We've got more of a diverse workforce. We've got far more women. We've got that, and that is what you want. And for me, that's a real positive of the apprenticeships and the people that we're recruiting. And, hats off to the recruitment team and their positive action work, because I think that's really been a benefit. And I think when I spoke about it in the emergency services show, there was a lot of people there that hadn't done apprenticeships, but they were really could see the benefits of how that would work for them. Having people then wanting to do that next role, because one of the questions was, well, how many people are doing the next role, and I said, well, we've only been doing apprenticeships since kind of 2019, and in the service, I think you end up staying in the job for a long time before you do that next role. It's almost expected of you. And I think with the apprenticeship, that doesn't happen now. So people are moving through those roles a bit quicker because they see that they're learning and they're pushing forward. So we're having, we've now got 8 people that have gone from a firefighter to a crew manager. And in quite a short space of time that wouldn't have happened if we hadn't got apprenticeships.
So that's really interesting. So you use this lovely phrase that people are in their learning groove. It's not just about time. Time is not necessarily the means by which to get promoted. It's about a commitment to continuous learning, to being in the groove, and to gathering that portfolio and keep going, to keep that mentality going. So Joe, you forensics apprenticeships are quite new to your area. Do you think the kind of things that Jane's talking about there in terms of the learning groove and moving on, I assume with a technical profession like yours that you are continually assessed for competence, because you need CPD to accredit. You presumably have some kind of governing body and all those sorts of things. Am I right?
Yeah. So each employee or apprentice is tested for competence, but so is every employee. So it's something that we're all getting used to. Accreditation has been a fairly new thing for all of us. So, but I think it is new to us, apprenticeships. We are very early in our journey. The first cohort only started in September, but the feedback already is really positive from the existing employees, who have found that these young people have come in really enthusiastic, very motivated, often with a different perspective on things, which has made the people in the workplace challenge their own opinions and their own way of doing things. And I think having to explain how to do something and why makes you more thoughtful about what you're doing, and has enthused some of the people already in post. So I think it's been really positive. There is a career pathway anyway, an existing career pathway for digital forensics. And so these technicians that are coming in at level 4, they can see a clear pathway through the profession for them. Now, not every apprentice will remain with the force that they've been recruited for, although many will, because many police forces are seeing this as part of their succession planning, so they will go straight into full-time posts at the end of it. But even those that don't stay with the same police force, it will have given them such an insight into the way policing works that they will be very, very employable by any other force, because they'll already have the skills and the knowledge that is required. So it makes them more valuable than a graduate, because they've already got the workplace skills that are needed. And it's not only policing they can stay in. There's lots of other law enforcement organisations in the country, or other government bodies, that would also value those skills and knowledge that they've learned. And I think some of them, that even if they decide digital forensics is not for them during their apprenticeship, they may stay within our policing family, because we're recruiting 18-year-olds who might not know anything about policing, or might have misconceptions about what working in policing is like. And we're really hoping that we can widen people's horizons as to what a career in policing can be like, not as an officer, but as a member of staff. How many different roles there are. And that's what we're really hoping, that we not only bring people into the profession where we need them, but also we open up policing as a career to people.
Excellent. So, Rachel, this must be music to your ears, this learning groove business, this portability of qualifications of skills and about this real commitment to lifelong learning. In terms of what services can do about this post-EPA, so post-endpoint assessment, what can they do that's kind of the next thing off the shelf? Is there something else they can follow up with? It's like Apprenticeships Plus, or how do the frameworks fit with this?
Yeah, so at the moment we've got, as part of the framework, we've got an associated training arm to it. So then there's scope for development there if there is progression. We have a separate training DPS, so there's other routes. In terms of learner journeys, we really like to hear of what experience and what their journey's actually been. Apprenticeships is a fantastic route into a career path, and we've had some wonderful feedback, certainly specifically like fire or from different learners, of like the lifelong learning and the personal growth, and that they are life skills are for life, no matter what other route you may go down. There's different learning modes of development, and one young lady, she was then looking to do something in HGV and get a HGV license, and it took her on a different path. We embrace the apprenticeships as well within our organisation, so we actually have them in multiple areas of our organisation as well, bringing in procurement professionals, wider mixing our logistics and different age groups as well. So it's really nice, and a lot of people have progressed, so it's really nice to see that path actually within our own organisation as well, and see just how much, you know, starting off as an apprenticeship and what career path they can then go on to actually bring.
On that professional associations point that I raised with Joe in terms of the accreditation to maintain competence, do you find that the people who are going through apprenticeships are going off into professions where they are being part of a professional body and continuing CPD in that more sort of formal sense? Is that an experience you see a lot? We
have seen it probably more internally, I would say, than externally, as a learner has moved on. Certainly internally, for example, obviously we're a procurement organisation supporting public sector, being publicly owned, and I think that path of then becoming professional, looking at being M6 qualified, for example. I know, probably showing my age now, but years ago, an apprenticeship and that sort of route and these different learning paths now really wasn't shouted about. It was very much, you leave school, you go get a job, or you know, it's university or college. So I think to have these different opportunities, and then so people can actually explore a different future, it's not as daunting because they're learning as well as getting paid at the same time.
Jane, this paper from Skills England that we talked about earlier, hoping we might be able to put the link up to that somewhere on this webinar, but does that talk about the post-apprenticeship experience and career pathways after that?
Not in any real detail. I think it really talks more about, it's very much focused on the country as a whole and the growth of the country rather than the individuals. There are what it talks about in there around that is the changing of the environment of the working life and what that will mean and how that will impact on some people. So some of the roles through AI a lot, and through automated working, through digital skills and computerization, there's going to be some roles that aren't going to be there. You know, they're even saying by 2035. And if that is the case, you know, what are those roles going to be replaced by? So it kind of talks about it in that form, but it doesn't really go into any great detail about, other than the fact that they want to build more of a growth and that they want to build the skills of the country, because they feel, you know, a lot of that they were talking about, you know, that the skills have dropped and that people haven't, and we actually saw it today when we had a session on English and maths. So it's about bringing the skills up as a whole and as a country, but it doesn't really say what they expect next, if you know what I mean. But they are talking about creating much more of a pathway, a sustainable.
All right. We didn't tell our watchers this afternoon that you were actually at an apprenticeships conference yourself today, Jane, which is what you're referring to just now. Talk about English. So you've got 40 or so apprenticeship professionals with you today in Derbyshire Fire Rescue Service, all talking about this stuff. So there's a real body of fire, but I'm sure in other sectors, of people who are all doing deep thinking with this stuff. Mentioned, it's interesting, you did the AI bingo buzzword for the webinar. It always comes up in one shape or form. And I'll come to you on this, Jo. So we talk about digital forensics, and we're talking about skills that we need to grow into, but skills also that fall away and things we don't need anymore. Is AI the big space in policing now that we need to get people skilled up for, not just in forensics, but generally?
Yeah, it's one of the biggest spaces because it impacts every single sector. Yeah. It's not just policing that it affects, but yeah, it affects every sector. So yeah, it's definitely one of our big areas.
Yes. And do you think that police chiefs are having this conversation and about how they're going to rectify that? Because ultimately, they're not great payers. Again, reference at the NPCC conference about we can't pay people what they can go and get, 10 times as much in the private sector. So how do you keep people? And is that through these apprenticeships, through that investment in people?
Our retention is one of our biggest challenges because people join policing because they have a passion for helping people. But it is difficult for when private sector comes in and offers 3-4 times the salary that they can get in policing. We are lucky that a lot of people do choose to stay because they are passionate about what they do and they can see the value of what they're doing. However, if we don't continue to support our employees and to develop them and give them the training and the opportunities, we will start to lose more, definitely. I think that is a really significant risk for us, that the demands of our roles are very high, the mental health issues are very high. So we need to make sure that we are upskilling our staff continuously. And you're right, AI is just one of the very many areas that in digital that's changing at such a significant rate. 2 years ago, we wouldn't have even been talking about AI. Now it's everywhere.
Yes, that's ChatGPT for you. Okay, so we've got a couple of questions here about PCDA. Now, I'm guessing this is police constable, but is it something else? What is PCDA?
Yeah.
Yes, Jo, you're nodding. Brilliant. So
it's a police constable degree.
Oh, okay, degree. That makes sense. Sorry, should have been quicker on the draw there. So how does the PCDA function? Are you able to help us with that? Or maybe Rachel as a supplier?
Rachel knows much more than I do, I think. She'd probably be able to answer that one better.
Let's come to you, Rachel, then. So let's go back to basics. How does it function? How does it work?
So I probably need to drill down a little bit more because there's so many apprenticeships that we manage. So yeah, the PCD, I'd say, is one of the main routes in, but it's also complemented by other entry routes through the College of Policing. So it's not the only route in. Obviously, it's based on being that degree level, but there are other routes that are supported. Like I say, that some of them we only touch. So yeah, I probably need to just do a bit of off the top of my head because I don't know that exact course.
Well, do you know what? Let's talk about it slightly differently. So if a police force was recruiting, and given that the Labour manifesto said that government is going to recruit 13,000 new police officers.
Yeah.
That's a big police constables, PCSOs, and also call handlers. How are people going to come into those roles, and will they all be apprenticeships? Does every police force have?
They've not made that clear, I don't think. But there's at the moment there's 3 routes in, as Rachel said. There's the police constable degree apprenticeship. There's the degree holders entry program for people that have already got existing degrees in relevant areas, and they can do a transfer conversion course. Or there's the police education qualification framework route, which is just the direct entry sort of route into policing. The PCDA is a 3-year degree apprenticeship. Am I correct, Rachel? So the apprentice is working 4 days a week or for a part of their time as a police officer on the street, and then they do their 1 day, their 20% protected working on their apprenticeship. And then when they pass their end point assessment, they are then a substantive police officer. But they've finished their probation. But they're working as a full-time police officer the rest of their time. So they're doing 2 at the same time, 2 roles at the same time.
Okay. And so this follow-up question asks the difference between the PCDA, which I now know what that is, and the PCEP, police constable. That's one of those options you just talked about. What's the EP?
I've not. Police constable entry program, maybe that's what PCEP. I don't know. I mean, the traditional route was the police education qualification framework, where you signed up, you joined as a police officer on day 1, and you did a competency workbook throughout your first 2 years, and you passed your probation at the end of 2 years. That's what they mean by PECP, which is just like the standard entry route that people would think of.
or somebody else who's watching us has answered the question. Says PCEP is the new route in.
Okay, yeah, probably replace the PEQF. So
there's a lot of acronyms in this world. I think we need to.
There are, yes. Yeah.
Okay, lovely. There we go with that degree. So thank you to our audience for that. Right. So we've talked about the people coming into the profession, and we've talked about the people where the gaps are and things that are disappearing and new opportunities. But one thing we haven't talked about is those higher level apprenticeships. Now, there's a level 7 apprenticeship, Joe, that you are concerned with. And the Skills England paper, you have some questions about whether that will continue. Do you want to just explain a little bit about what your concerns are?
Yeah, so that was one of the areas within the Skills England report that is not 100% clear. They talk about how technical skills may still be funded, but it needs further clarification. It's not clear what they call technical skills and which existing apprenticeships will continue to be funded through the levy. So, I mean, and that would have a major impact on policing if we remove the levy funding for the level 7 apprenticeships, because it means the employers will have to pay the cost. And there are not training budgets in the public sector that will be able to pay. It's 27,000 for the digital forensics practitioner apprenticeship at level 7. But it's highlighted that there's a big skills gap for us in digital forensics in policing. It's a high priority area for government, as the Home Secretary said on Tuesday. So I would hope that something like a digital forensics apprenticeship will continue to be funded through the level 7, through the levy. However, the kind of courses that apprenticeships that may not be funded that concern me a bit as well are many of our failings in the public sector are due to leadership failings. They highlight it as leadership and structural issues. And so things like leadership, management, strategic thinking kind of apprenticeships, systems thinking kinds of apprenticeships, they may not be included within the level 7 levy. Okay. And we may no longer be able to draw funds for the levy for those kinds of courses. So that's something that would potentially be a consideration for us and an issue for us.
Interesting. So you talk about the Home Secretary talking about her these changes, the police reform that she talked about earlier in the week. But of course, she also has Fire and Rescue Service in the Home Office that sponsors the Fire and Rescue Service. So with Jane, in terms of the Grenfell report, one of the things that Martin Moore-Book said in his Phase 2 report was, you need to sort out the fire engineering profession because there's just not enough people and you need to professionalise all those kind of things. And I'm sure lots of work is going on in the institution of fire engineers doing all their work. But in terms of apprenticeships at that same level that Joe has been talking about, do you have concerns that they won't be supported either?
I'm hoping not. I think a little bit like Joe was saying, in the fact that I think there's a real need, and it's quite evident in the Grenfell report that it is a need. We have had a small amount of money out of the first Grenfell report, and we will continue to have some money from the government to support that because they know there's this massive gap. So I think obviously it will be paid out of the levy, but hopefully we'll be able to supplement that from a separate pot around that fire safety engineering and the need to make sure that we're recruiting that and retaining people within the fire services to do that major task. So I'm waiting, like we're all waiting, as Joe said, to clarify some of this, because I think, it does talk about technical stuff, but they're not very clear about what some of the technical stuff is. So I think for us, it's just making sure that the things that are really priorities are funded in that way. The other thing to think about when it comes to funding is, and actually we've spoken about that today in the conference that I'm at, is a thing called levy sharing. So it's where you take the levy from somebody else who hasn't spent it all and you use it in the way that you can use that to deliver your own programs. So it's really, really simple to do. It's not overcomplicated at all. And obviously the only thing you've got to be mindful of is that you're sharing it with an organisation that is of the same, you don't want to be somebody investing in your organisation who hasn't got the principles that you have. But a lot of councils are on there, and a lot of charities. So, and Rachel's nodding at me because she knows about this probably, but it's a really significant amount of money that you can actually draw down from other people's levies, and that might, Jo, be a way for you to go. So I don't know if you want to add to that, Rachel.
Yeah, thank you. We've seen that, and certainly are encouraging. It's amazing the amount of levy that's not used, but as well as supporting. We've seen it a lot with local authorities supporting bridging those skills gaps with levy funding being being shared that isn't necessarily needed in another sector or by another organisation. So we've definitely seen that, and we're encouraging that, doing quite an initiative on that. It is evident that the needs are at the detriment of, certainly if higher apprenticeship routes go, then it's at the detriment of an employer then having to foot that. Is there the money there? Not necessarily. So then where is that then going to go? So I think the levy sharing could obviously really plug that if that could be encouraged, or even certain sponsorships from it could be from other sectors certainly that aren't using them. We have vital resources that are needed, and certainly, as we've discussed today, the changes that are coming with climate change, environmental, that sort of thing. It's important that we look after our world really, on different impacts, and how can we do that by pulling rank.
Okay, fantastic. So that's some good advice between you there around levy sharing. That's the end of our main discussion. So we're coming up to time soon. So what I want you to do now is to help our watchers this afternoon to understand what is the thing you want them to go home and talk about. So we're going to go back to the office or go onto another screen probably, to say, what is the one piece of advice you'd offer them in terms of having an apprenticeships conversation that would take them one step forward. So Jane, I'll start with you. What is your one piece of advice for viewers this afternoon?
Plan. I think plan your pathway. Don't start off with one apprenticeship and think that you need to know where that's going to lead to. You've got people that are going to be part of those apprenticeships, and it's making sure maybe you can't always employ everyone at the end, but what you need to do is have a pathway so there is somewhere for them to go, an opportunity. So planning for me and involving key people within your organisation are the two main things that I would say.
Right, you snuck a second one in there, but I'll forgive you. Rachel, what was your piece of advice?
Certainly, I've drafted this before we joined, and on the back of Jane's succession planning, I think it's something we're very big on. You're putting that investment, that initial investment in training someone, and ensuring that there is that career pathway to look after the person, as well as your own investment to secure your future as an organisation. That I would emphasise that, and that's certainly the biggie for me.
Lovely, thank you, Rachel. And finally, Jo, from you, what is your one piece of advice for people this afternoon?
The biggest thing for me is partnership, working in collaboration across your sector. So really thinking about what are the skills we need the most, where are the gaps, what is important for us, and who else is there within. So like we talked about the importance of trailblazer groups earlier and creating your community. Start to think about, it's not just us, who else does it affect? So we've worked across private sector as well as the public sector, creating our apprenticeships. Create that community, that collaboration, because you're stronger working across sectors and across organisations than just trying to do it on your own.
Excellent. So some great advice there, and lots of it beginning with P, which is always helpful to be able to remember. Planning, pathways, succession planning,
and partnerships, collaboration and community. So some great tips there. Thank you all. I think it's been really interesting to take a bit of the Labour Party manifesto, which I did read in full, and kind of look at it now progressing through policy, looking at how you are all affected by it, and what now you can go and do, perhaps to influence the changes that you can see, all about that kind of growth agenda. So I think it's great to be so topical, so now. So thank you very much for joining me this afternoon. I'm going to summarise now and just and thank us to move on to end the webinar now. So I'd just like to thank you all very much for coming. We're disappearing off into the wings. Thank you very much to join this afternoon. The webinar will be available on catch up as soon as I finish speaking.
Any notes of the webinar we hosted here too. I'm going to try and get that Skills England link added to the webinar. I'll ask the team here to do that because I think that paper is well worth a read if you're interested in this space. You're going to get some CPD accreditation from joining us this afternoon, and we will send that to you by email, so watch out for that. And then the next webinar, we've got another one next week. It's all go at the moment with our webinars. We've got one on the 28th of November. We'll be looking at biodiversity net gain, which is a change to procurement rules so that you have to increase the biodiversity of your development. So that'll be an interesting listen next week if you want to register for that. Do visit our website on emergencyservicestimes.com and sign up for our weekly and daily digest if you'd like to hear more about what's going on, because there's always plenty to read about. So it just leaves me to say thank you very much for watching.